During Lent, Peggy and I have been doing this for a couple of years. What we do on Friday nights is we go out to different fish fry places in the Twin Cities. This year, we have got the 32 fish fry options in the Twin Cities from the Tribune that we're kind of working our way through. And on Friday night, we went to a place that we have not been before. It's the Northbound Smokehouse. It's on 38th Street, just west of 55 in Minneapolis. It was a great place. We went there with my college roommate and his wife, and we just had a great time. But as we got done with our dinner, we realized that there was this crowd of people waiting to come in and sit down. And so we said we weren't ready to end our conversation, but we knew we needed to get out of there. So what we did is we left and we went down the street to a brewery that we'd never been to. And we just sat there and continued the conversation at this place. But as we sat there and we looked around the crowd in that brewery, we talked about how much the culture had changed around us. When we graduated from college and we were living in the cities, people our age went out to bars. They went out to party, they went out to dance, and they went out to find dates. We'll call it that way. And the only quiet place to drink and just have a conversation were like those corner bars, that you would go into and there would be like, 4 or 5 creepy old guys sitting there and they've been there since 11 o'clock in the morning, so it wasn't really comfortable to be there. But today, in these breweries, no one's out getting drunk or partying. They're going to be with friends. And oftentimes, the people that are there aren't even drinking alcohol. They're not dancing, they're not getting crazy. They were playing board games. They were playing cards. They're having conversation. They even had their pets there in the bar with them. It was unbelievable. The breweries do everything in their power to make their place inviting, comfortable, accessible, and easy to use. And people flock to them not for the dynamic energy they produce, but for the calm and relaxed atmosphere that they provide. And every time I'm in one of those places, I just sit there and I think to myself, the church could really learn so much from studying these places, which encourage community and seek to give people what they want. We live in a world that is fluid. The culture around us is always adapting and changing to the needs and trends of the people in their neighborhood. And congregations tend to operate the exact opposite way. Congregations want the culture to adapt and change to them, even when the change they want people to make is not related to faith, but a tradition developed years ago in the life of the congregation. And the one I always use as an example of this is Vacation Bible School. Years ago, we created Vacation Bible School because kids had nothing to do in the summertime. There were not a lot of options for kids. They just hung around and wasted time. And the church said, oh, you know what? As these kids have nothing to do, we'll provide for them an activity. We'll give them a great time that they would have a week of something going on, and we'll provide a little faith education along the way. But the culture changed. Like 50 years ago, the culture changed. And congregations still try over and over again to make Vacation Bible School work, even though it's not what the culture wants or needs. When we do things like this, when we promote ministries that do not meet needs, we are subtly telling people we don't realize we're doing it. We subtly tell people we don't really care about you, but we want you to care about us. And we care about us. And we want you to know why we care about us. So if you don't care about us, we're not the problem. You are. Congregations need to spend more time deliberately thinking and defining what people want and what they need. And then adapt for how they do ministry and to make sure, is it meeting the needs and wants of the people? Well, we can learn from breweries because they give people what they want and what they need, but they don't always give people everything they need. But in the absence of a lot of healthy alternatives, people are left with what they can get. Today, we're going to be looking and seeking the answer to a question: how do we begin again? I want to suggest this is both a question to individuals, but it's also a question to communities as a whole, communities like the church. Yesterday, we had this family day. It was just an absolute blessing. My son is getting deployed tomorrow, and this is how alert his father is. He gave me a birthday present for June. I looked at him, I said, why are you giving me this birthday present? He goes, because I won't be here, Dad. I mean, we're gone March, April, May, June, going to miss everybody's birthday. So we had a big birthday party yesterday. It was really fun. The blessing beyond the gift that he gave, the blessing was really watching your kids, that your kids are in a good place. And they've finally got things a little bit figured out. They're in their 30s now, so I'm happy that that's happened. I would appreciate it if they'd have been in their teens, but that's asking too much. But two things struck me as I'm watching them. Even though they're doing well in so many areas of their life, there remains a spiritual hunger for something they need, but do not know where to find it. And the realization that my children did not leave the church left them. And it's a hard thing to say when you're a pastor and the leader of the church they attended. When I say church, I'm not talking about belief or faith in God. My kids have that. I'm not talking about values and principles grounded in Christ. My kids have that. They need a place to practice their faith. They need a place to be challenged, to think their faith, and they need a place that will meet them where they're at and provide them the spiritual growth they desire. At the same time, as the lead pastor of a congregation, I need people like my children. I need them to help me practice my faith. I need them to help me be challenged to think the faith. I need them to help me grow spiritually as well. So how do we reconnect? How do we look at the spiritual relationship and begin again? So we turn to Nicodemus, this story. And the story of Nicodemus is absolutely fascinating. And the complexities of it are such that it's better to be examined in a Bible study than it is to do in a sermon. There's just so much to chew on. But let's start in this very first line. There was a Pharisee named Nicodemus, a Jewish leader. It's a very innocent line, right? He tells us a name, gives us a title, gives us a designation. This innocent line takes on more meaning, though, if you read chapter 2. And at the end of chapter 2, it is Passover, and Jesus goes into the temple and turns over the tables of the temple and takes the cord out and tells the Pharisees and the leaders of the church that he's undoing the temple. He's going to tear it down and build it up in 3 days. So Jesus is not a popular figure at this time. So in this first line, the reader or hearer of the story must ask, is Nicodemus someone who Jesus can trust as he comes in that door? Because we know darn well Jesus is asking the same question. Second line, he came to Jesus at night and said to him, Rabbi, we know that you're a teacher who has come from God, for no one could do these miraculous signs that you do unless God is with them. Nicodemus came to Jesus at night. There's two meanings in this text. One, we know Nicodemus is risking his own safety. Nicodemus is asking that trust question, the same thing as Jesus is doing. He comes in the night because he is afraid. If they're willing to kill Jesus for turning over the table in the temple, they will kill those with him as well. It highlights a couple of things, too. It's not every Pharisee was an enemy of God. A lot of Pharisees were desiring that relationship with Jesus, and Nicodemus will be with Jesus at the end. But there's another meaning deeper in the immediate words. This little encounter is itself connected to chapter 1. When we read in chapter 1, what came into being through the Word was life, and the life was the light for all people to see. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness does not extinguish that light. Here in this room, in the dark, there is light. Nicodemus comes to Jesus in the dark, and he is carrying the dark with him. It is a lack of understanding. He's coming out of a classification that are enemies of God, who Jesus confronted in the temple. There's a lot of darkness there, but Nicodemus understands Jesus is from God. He knows there's something there that is light and possesses a power and authority that he doesn't completely understand, but he's yearning to know. We know he doesn't understand it because he calls him rabbi and teacher, not Lord or Son of God. Nicodemus knows that there is something there in this dark room, some light lingering in this dark room that he needs to know. We are left to assume that Nicodemus sees the needs of the world around him and knows that Jesus has something to offer, something we both want and need. The lesson which Jesus teaches Nicodemus is a lesson we need to hear today as well. It is food for the modern church. You need to stop seeing your flesh as flesh and define yourself by the Spirit of God. Tradition cannot save you, cannot give you a new beginning, nor lead you to abundant life. Only the Spirit of God can do such things. The Reformation happened because clergy like Martin Luther broke away from tradition to follow the Spirit and called people back to faithfulness. We are Methodists because the same thing happened to John Wesley 200 years later. He was looking at a church at a broken system where tradition was more important than the people around him, and Wesley says we got to follow the Spirit. And maybe, just maybe, we're in that same place right now that we're clinging to as this world around us changes, and it's changing at a rapid pace. That we come to our tradition, but really what we should be clinging to is the Spirit of God. When we consider the context of Jesus meeting Nicodemus, it calls our attention to grasp a lesson. It wasn't the culture that had a problem with Jesus. It was the religious leaders who didn't like Jesus. They were the ones offended that Jesus was growing the realm of God and making God more accessible to all. The Gospel of John uses the Greek word cosmos. Cosmos can mean world, it can mean order, it has a variety of meanings, but in the Gospel of John, consistently from the beginning to end, cosmos in his Gospel is used to describe entities which are hostile to God. If you go through and do a word search, go back at home. This is your homework for the day. Go and look up all the world in there, and you'll see that. Again, as he sits there and talks in chapter 3 about the world, it's shaped by chapter 1. The light was in the world, and the world came into being through the light, but the world did not recognize the light. When you have a full understanding of John's intention with the word world as people hostile to God, it changes completely how you read verses 16 and 17. As David Lose proposes, you could read them this way. For God so loved the God-hating world that he gave his only Son. And God did not send the Son into the world to condemn even this world that despises God, but instead so that the world that rejects God might be saved through him. What do you think will happen if we as a community of faith started saying to ourselves, we're going to be led by the Spirit of God in every single thing we do? That we look at our tradition and sit there and go, are we being led by the Spirit on this? As we look at the future, are we going to be led by the Spirit in this? And ask ourselves, are we being a light in the darkness or a traffic light at the intersection of culture and faith? I pray that we would be a light in darkness. Now, I'm completely confident if we start following the Spirit of God, we won't need to ask if it is possible to be born again. We will experience it. And I'm completely sure if we, the church, start following the Spirit of God in our ministry and fully embrace John 3:17, people in the culture will not ask if it's possibly born again. They will know it, and will know where to find new life again and again and again. Whenever I think of this, I always think of the rose bush. And I want you to consider for a moment the rose bush. In the summer, when it blooms, if you care for it, if you deadhead the old buds that come up, it will continue to bloom throughout the summer. And a time will come when the wind and the weather will change and become cold. It will go dormant, it will sleep, and then again in the spring, it will come to life and bloom over and over again. As we move forward, I pray that we treat the world, those hostile to God and those embracing God, for those who are hostile to God in and outside of the church, that we tend to them like a gardener tends a rose bush, to water it, to pluck off those dead heads, to create new life, so we might not just live, but we might live abundantly. Amen.